She was blind, alone, and forgotten by everyone. Then a wandering stranger described the sunset and changed her life forever. Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories' new emotional tales every day. The small house sat where the prairie grass met the last fence post of Dusty Creek, a town that had grown comfortable forgetting what existed beyond its mercantile and saloon. The dwelling was modest, paint peeling from years of wind and neglect, yet the front porch held flower boxes that somehow bloomed with wildflowers despite the harsh conditions. Inside that house lived Eleanor May Patterson, a woman of 32 years who had not seen the sunrise in over 4 years. The fever that took her husband William had also stolen her sight, leaving her alone in a world of darkness with nothing but memories of colors she could no longer witness. Eleanor had learned to navigate her small world through touch and sound. She knew exactly 14 steps from her bed to the kitchen stove. She could feel when the bread dough had been kneaded enough. She recognized the songs of different birds that visited her windowsill each morning. But what Eleanor could not know was that the townspeople of Dusty Creek had slowly erased her from their daily thoughts. The preacher visited once a month. The grocer's boy delivered supplies every 2 weeks, leaving them on her porch with barely a word. She had become invisible, a ghost living among the living. Samuel Thornton rode into Dusty Creek on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, when the air carried the first whispers of autumn. He was 40 years old, a former cavalry scout who had spent 2 decades mapping territories and guiding settlers westward. His face carried the deep lines of a man who had seen too many horizons, and his heart held the quiet ache of someone who had never found a reason to stop moving. Samuel had come to Dusty Creek seeking land to purchase, hoping to finally build the horse ranch he had dreamed about during countless nights under open skies. He had saved enough money, and his bones had grown weary of constant travel. He found a room at the boarding house and spent his first week meeting with the land office and exploring the surrounding territory. It was during one of these explorations that he first noticed the small house at the edge of town. What caught his attention was not the house itself, but the woman sitting on the front porch, her face turned toward the setting sun as if she could drink in its warmth. Her dark hair was pinned back simply, and her hands rested on a basket of mending in her lap. She did not move as he rode past, and something about her stillness made him slow his horse. Samuel tipped his hat out of habit, but she did not acknowledge the gesture. He rode on, puzzled but thinking little more of it. The second time Samuel saw Eleanor was 3 days later at the general store. He was purchasing supplies when the grocer, a heavy-set man named Henderson, was packing a small crate of goods. "That for delivery?" Samuel asked, making conversation. Henderson glanced at the crate with something like weariness. "The widow Patterson. Lives out past the edge of town. Boy's supposed to take it out tomorrow. The woman in the small house with the flower boxes? That's her. Blind as a bat, that one. Fever took her eyes same time it took her husband. Shame, really. She was pretty once." Samuel frowned at the casual way Henderson spoke, as if Eleanor's blindness had diminished her worth as a person. "She manages alone out there. Been 4 years now. Stubborn woman. Won't take charity, pays for everything herself with money her husband left. Course that'll run out eventually." Henderson shrugged and turned to help another customer. Samuel stood there for a long moment, holding his purchases and thinking about a woman facing the sunset she could not see. That evening, Samuel found himself riding out toward the edge of town. He told himself he was simply exploring, getting to know the land he planned to call home. But when he reached the small house, he dismounted and stood at the gate of the simple fence. Eleanor was on the porch again, this time stringing beans into a bowl. Her fingers moved with practiced certainty, never hesitating despite their blindness. "Good evening," Samuel called out, not wanting to startle her. Her hands paused for just a moment. "Good evening. You're not from town. Your voice is new. Just arrived last week. Name's Samuel Thornton. Eleanor Patterson. She resumed her work. You're the one looking to buy land. News travels, even to forgotten corners. Seems you're not as forgotten as you might think. Then, a small smile crossed her face, the first he had seen from her. People talk about me. That's different from remembering I exist. Samuel had no response to that truth. He stood awkwardly at the gate, watching her work. Those are fine flower boxes you have. You can see colors, so you would know better than I. I only remember what colors used to look like. The flowers smell like happiness, though. That's enough. Red, Samuel said suddenly. The ones on the left are red, bright as a cardinal's wing. The middle ones are yellow, like butter or sunshine. And the right side has purple, deep purple like a bruise on a sunset. Eleanor's hands stopped completely. Her face turned toward his voice, and he saw that her eyes, though unseeing, were a pale blue that held no bitterness, only a deep and practiced patience. No one has described colors to me since William passed. People assume the blind don't want to be reminded of what they've lost. Maybe they just don't know what to say, or they don't think to say anything at all. Samuel stepped through the gate without really deciding to do so. Mind if I sit a spell? Been a long day of looking at empty land. The chair to the left has a weak leg. Take the one on the right. He sat, and they talked until the stars came out. Samuel described the sky to her, told her about the places he had traveled, the mountains he had crossed, and the rivers he had followed. Eleanor listened with her whole being, her face animated in ways it had not been in years. When Samuel finally rose to leave, Eleanor said, "You don't have to come back. People make promises to the blind because they feel guilty, and then the promises get forgotten. I don't make promises I can't keep, never have." The next day, Samuel returned, and the day after that. Within 2 weeks, his visits to Eleanor's porch had become as regular as the sunrise. He fixed the weak chair leg without being asked. He repaired a loose board on her steps. He told her when the leaves began to change colors, describing each shade of gold and crimson with the patience of a man who had finally found someone worth slowing down for. Eleanor began to look forward to the sound of his horse apper, oching in the evenings. She found herself smiling more, humming songs she had forgotten she knew. The darkness that had settled into her heart began to lift, replaced by something warm and frightening in its unfamiliarity. "You're teaching me to see again," she told him one evening. "Not with my eyes, but with your words." Samuel reached out and took her hand, something he had wanted to do for days. "And you're teaching me to stay still. I've spent my whole life moving toward the next horizon. Never occurred to me that what I was looking for might be found in one place." "What were you looking for?" "Home. I think I've been looking for home." Eleanor squeezed his hand, and neither of them let go until the night grew cold enough to force them inside. The town of Dusty Creek began to notice the change. Samuel Thornton, the newcomer who had purchased the old Morrison land east of town, was spending all his spare time with the blind widow no one remembered. Whispers started, as whispers do in small towns. Some said he was after her money. Others claimed he felt sorry for her. A few, the kind-hearted few, hoped it might be something more. Samuel heard the whispers and ignored them. He was too old and too experienced to care what others thought. His heart had spoken clearly, and he had learned long ago to trust that voice above all others. One afternoon, he arrived at Eleanor's house to find her upset. Her hands were shaking as she sat at her kitchen table, and when she turned toward the sound of his entrance, he could see she had been crying. "Eleanor, what happened?" "The grocer's boy brought my supplies. He also brought a letter from William's brother in Boston. He wants me to come east, to live with his family. He says a blind woman has no business living alone in a place like this." Samuel felt something cold grip his heart. "What do you want?" "I want to stay here. This is my home. William and I built this life together, and just because he's gone doesn't mean our memories are." She paused, her voice breaking. "But what if he's right? What if I'm fooling myself, thinking I can manage?" Samuel knelt beside her chair and took both her hands in his. Eleanor, you're the strongest person I've ever met. You've survived things that would break most people, and you've done it with grace and dignity. You're not fooling anyone. But I'm so tired, Samuel. Tired of being alone, tired of being invisible. You're not invisible to me, you're the most visible thing in my world. Every morning I wake up thinking about when I'll see you again. Every night I fall asleep remembering the sound of your voice. Eleanor's breath caught. Samuel, what are you saying? I'm saying that I love you. I've loved you since that first evening when you told me flowers smell like happiness. I love your courage and your strength, and the way you face each day without complaint. I love how you make me want to be a better man, a man worthy of describing sunsets to you for the rest of our lives. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, but she was smiling. I can't see your face, Samuel. I don't know if you're handsome or plain. I don't know the color of your eyes or your hair. Does it matter? No, she whispered. It doesn't matter at all, because I know your heart, and your heart is beautiful. Samuel leaned forward and pressed his lips to her forehead. A gentle kiss full of promise. Marry me, Eleanor. Let me be your eyes. Let me give you a home where you're never forgotten again. Yes, she said without hesitation. Yes, Samuel, yes. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the small church at the center of Dusty Creek. The whole town turned out, partly from curiosity and partly from a dawning sense of shame that they had let Eleanor slip from their notice for so long. The preacher spoke of love that sees beyond sight, of devotion that grows in unexpected soil. Samuel stood at the altar in his best suit, his weathered face soft with emotion, as Eleanor walked down the aisle on the arm of Henderson the grocer, who had volunteered to give her away. She wore a simple white dress that she had sewn herself by touch, and wildflowers from her own flower boxes adorned her hair. To Samuel, she was the most beautiful bride who had ever lived. I promised to be your eyes, Samuel said when it came time for vows. I promised to describe every sunrise and every sunset, every storm cloud and every rainbow. I promised to tell you when the first snow falls and when the first flowers bloom. I promise that as long as I draw breath, you will never face the darkness alone. Eleanor's voice was steady when she spoke. I promise to be your home, Samuel. I promise to give you a reason to stop wandering, a place where your heart can rest. I promise to listen to your stories and share your dreams. I promise that as long as I draw breath, you will never be rootless again. When the preacher pronounced them married, Samuel kissed his bride while the congregation wiped tears from their eyes. They moved into the house Samuel had built. On his new land, a house with wide porches and flower boxes beneath every window. Eleanor learned the new layout within days, her quick mind mapping each room, each piece of furniture, each doorway. Samuel bought her a piano, and though she had not played since losing her sight, her fingers remembered the keys. In the evenings she would play while Samuel sat beside her, describing the stars that appeared one by one in the darkening sky. They adopted a dog, a gentle golden creature named Biscuit, who learned to guide Eleanor around the property when Samuel was working with the horses. The ranch prospered, and soon Samuel's reputation for breeding fine horses spread throughout the territory. But more than the ranch's success, it was their love that became legendary. Travelers who stopped in Dusty Creek heard about the former scout and his blind wife, about the way he still described colors to her after years of marriage, about the way she still played piano for him every evening. Some nights they would sit on their porch and Samuel would read aloud from books Eleanor chose. Other nights they would simply sit in comfortable silence, holding hands and listening to the prairie wind. Do you ever regret it? Eleanor asked one evening, years into their marriage. Taking on a blind wife when you could have had anyone? Samuel pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. The only regret I have is all the years I spent wandering when I could have been finding you sooner. You found me at the right time, any sooner and neither of us would have been ready. Then I regret nothing, not one single moment. Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder. Tell me what you see, Samuel. Tell me about tonight. The sky is purple and orange, like someone spilled paint across heaven. There's a band of clouds low on the horizon, pink as a baby's cheek. The first star just appeared, bright and steady, right above the barn, and the prairie grass is golden in the last light, waving like an ocean I once saw when I was young. It sounds beautiful, not as beautiful as you. Eleanor laughed, the same laugh that had captured his heart so many years ago. Flatterer, truth-teller. They sat together as the night deepened, two souls who had found each other against all odds in a forgotten corner of a small town on the edge of the prairie. The people of Dusty Creek never forgot Eleanor again. She became the heart of the community, known for her kindness and her music and her unwavering courage. And Samuel, the man who had spent a lifetime searching for home, finally stopped looking. He had found something better than a place to belong. He had found someone to belong to, and in that discovery, both the wanderer and the widow found what they had needed all along. A love that could see beyond sight, beyond circumstance, beyond all the obstacles that life could place in their path. They had found each other, and that was more than enough.